This is the completed JFAK 6 knife. Hey gang, I decided to do this JFAK with a voiceover because there's a lot to talk about. We're starting with a core of 1084 steel, nickel sheet on either side of that, and a jacket of 410 stainless steel. I'll talk more about that later and why we're choosing that. I've made very few stainless sand mine knives, so we'll see how this goes. I have a customer who wants some, which is why I'm trying it now. The idea with the nickel sheet is that it should provide a more awesome transition zone, and some people think it welds to stainless better than carbon steel. I ground all the surfaces to 120 grit, then tack welded them together at the corners, which I ground flush before putting in the stainless steel canister with a bit of paper at the bottom. I'm filling in the tiny gaps along the sides with iron powder to get absolutely as much air and oxygen out of there as possible. There are 5 classes of stainless steel. We usually choose from 300 or 400 for stainless sand mine. The 300 series steels are austenite at room temperature. They're austenitic. They are not hardenable by heat treating for this reason, but they can be hardened to some degree with cold working. But they can't be hardened enough to make a knife. So the 300 series is non-magnetic, more ductile than the 400 series, and more corrosion resistant than the 400 series. The 400 series is martensitic. It can be quenched to make it harder. Some 400 series steels like 420 and 440 even have enough carbon to make them hardenable enough to the point they make a knife edge, but that's not really what we're after here. I've used 304 before, but some people think 400 series offers a better looking transition line between the core and the jacket. Plus, I read that Carl Anderson uses 410, and that's really all I need to know. Now, 410 is more expensive than 416, but 416 apparently has more sulfur, which complicates the forge welding and makes some other forging processes more difficult. At any rate, I'm guessing a lot of you have done much more stainless sand mine than I have, so just put in the comments section which stainless you use and why. The billet was held at forge welding temperatures for about 15 minutes in the forge before taking it to the press and flattening it out. I'm not going crazy with the first press. You guys probably noticed it was only squished a small amount before going back in the forge for another solid 10 minutes at forge welding temperatures, and then I finished the flattening. Because the canister is stainless, it doesn't really forge weld to the jacket, which is also stainless, so it's easy to cut out of here. I do have to grind some iron off the sides, but after that, I've etched it to check the center line, and the core looks pretty good. Well centered. There's no reason it shouldn't be, but it's good to check it out. I'm going to take this to the press and draw it out to about 5/16 inches thick. That'll give us plenty of material to take off the sides to get the scale out of there. This scales very easily, this stainless does. It really gets some pitting and stuff. Core still looks good. It's even smoother now that those ridges have been taken down. Let's draw out our knife. Our customer wants a 4.5 to 5 inch blade, and we're definitely going to have enough material for that here, so that's good news. It is said that well-made stainless sand mine can be forged to shape. You shouldn't be risking much splitting if the welds are done properly. But I think there are other issues with forging the stainless and the core. You know, they react differently at different temperatures. You can introduce a lot of stresses and things if you forge this too cold. And then I really don't want to knock the core off center by forging on the blade. That shouldn't be too difficult to avoid, but I don't know why I would risk it. We have enough material. It's just easier to grind most of this to shape. We are going to forge some of the tang a little bit. We're going to have to draw that out. Like we talked about, this is going to have to go back in the forge, and we're going to have to draw out that tang a little bit. We need a little bit more length to work with. I started this process out on the press, which should do a good job, but visually I can see pretty quickly here that the press is just making the tang colder than I want it to. You know, we really want hot steel here. We don't want to stress these welds at all. So I take it back to the anvil where it doesn't cool off as quickly, and I can do some light blows and not stress out the steel. This is my theory at any rate. You know, like I said, this isn't my usual cup of tea, so I'm just trying everything to keep it from delaminating. We're going to grind in some bevels, and then you'll see me peening the sides of the knife. I saw a few people recommend this as a way to decrease the stresses from the stainless jacket during quench. A major issue with sanmai is the different properties of the core and the jacket material often create a lot of stress during the heat treat that can lead to weld separation, or more commonly the core just splitting down the middle. This is one example of that happening. This was a birdshot jacket on a core of, I think it was 1084. But when metal enters the austenitic state at high heat, it actually shrinks. And then when it goes to martensite during the quench, it expands very rapidly. And dramatic things happen. You can think of a katana, which goes into the quench straight, but because the spine is clayed and only the edge undergoes martensitic transformation, the force of that expanding martensite along the edge is strong enough to actually bend the katana backwards towards the spine during the quench. So you can imagine that when our sanmai core is moving around that quickly, but the jacket material it's welded to isn't budging, that there's a lot of stress created, and in fact it just sort of wants to tear itself apart sometimes. So like we said, the 300 series steels can't be hardened with heat treating, but they do harden cold working, which is why I think people recommend peening the stainless jackets. And that may pertain more to 300 series than the 400 series, the 410 that I'm working with. So I don't think this is going to do much here, but a little voodoo can't hurt. You know, I'm just going to do it. Since I don't have a good understanding of it and it can't really hurt, I'm going to just try it. So aside from practicing voodoo, another thing we can do to reduce splitting is to only bring the edge up to transformation temperature in the forge. The edge should heat up quicker than the jacketed portion since it's thinner, and since it is the only steel shrinking into austenite, there's less chance of the spine splitting, which is usually where the split happens. So the edge turns into austenite, but the spine shouldn't be getting hot enough to do this. Now, I don't think we were particularly successful here. I think it all got a little too hot, which is why I made a split decision just to do an edge quench here, hoping that that would reduce some of the stress of at least the martensitic transformation along the spine. But the oil fire here had me quench the entire blade a little sooner than I wanted to. Here it is. You can see I ground on this side and then etched it, and I'm just getting to the core there. You can sort of see the core there. See on this edge? And then I still have to grind on this side. But I had to come down this way because this split right here, this right side started splitting right in here. I've finally ground it, and you can barely see it, but when it gets wet, or when there's fine dust that starts collecting, a crack. You can see it's fine little split right there and right there. It's almost gone. If I ground down another 2-3 millimeters here, it'd probably be gone. I just wouldn't have much knife left. And that weld being bad makes me wonder about the other welds too. To be honest, having some bad welds around the very edge of your billet, you know, I can understand that, but when they're sort of deeper into the middle part of what was the billet, then you really have to wonder. So I had to start over. That's where I'm going with this. I did same exact thing, same process, only I got the forge much hotter. I was actually sparking the canister. This canister was falling off and oxidizing and sparking away when I pressed it. So, you know, I don't think I was quite hot enough to get a full nice weld with this effort. But the next effort, as you're going to see, turned out just fine. So to clarify, that wasn't the core splitting from the quench. That was a bad weld. I don't think it ever welded correctly because we didn't get the forge hot enough. So again, repeated this all with the same construction, same canister, just no nickel sheets and much hotter. The canister was sparking off during the soaks. Okay, so this is the handle to the second billet. This is the piece of the end of the second billet sort of folded over. And the seams, I think, are a lot tighter and the weld's a lot better. I turned this on its side on the anvil, hammered flat perpendicular to the welds, which run this way, sort of spread them apart, tried to pull them apart. Nothing popped here, very tight. There's the core running up and down the center. And here it is sort of spreading out. So you can see that that really put a strain on the forge welding and it held up really well. And that's really good for stainless sanmai. It's a little bit trickier to get solid welds. All right, here it is. I'm unwrapping it after the temper and praying that nothing cracked during the temper, which has happened to me before, interestingly enough. So it looks pretty good. We did good. I'm going to get it ground up and we'll do a little cursory etch to wrap up the video. You'll see the final knife in the next JFAK. So to recap, we started with 1/4 inch stainless steel and a 3/16 inch 1084 core. We didn't use nickel sheets, though we probably could have. An oxygen-free environment, long, super high temperature soaks, like close to melting steel temperatures. Got the job done with some really solid welds. So at any rate, maybe this will help you with y'all's venture into stainless sanmai. And maybe not. You probably could teach me something. But I do like that transition line. Look at that, guys. That is going to be nice. Well, I'll see you next time. You guys have a good one.